we are incredibly fortunate to have the giants of the giants with us in the form of Farouk El-Baz, who led to the success of the Apollo missions, godfather of remote sensing, as you mentioned, and really helped craft the present that we're enjoying. And, we talk about great Arab Americans. I mean, Farouk is just an incredible American, incredible citizen of the world, and has done so much to benefit all of us and allow Redwire and space and NASA to have this amazing future that we're now taking advantage of. So I want to say thank you for not only for joining us, but for everything that you have done. And I know it's virtual, but let's do a virtual round of applause for Farouk El-Baz and again his accomplishments.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it, Farouk. And just to start out, we'd love to just start at the beginning, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up, and how you came to geology, particularly in the first place.
Well, I grew up in Damietta. That's on the. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you
Okay.
loud and clear.
And Damietta at the coastline of the Mediterranean Sea. That's the meeting point between the Nile and the sea. And I was always fascinated by the floods every single year. The Nile water comes up and floods into the sea. And I would take my three younger sisters to show them this fantastic event for days along the watching what is the rushing water. It's the water becomes brown from the soil that's carrying, and then it brings in all kinds of things, including weird plants and weird animals that we have not seen, including crocodiles and trees that we've never seen. And so I was always fascinated by this flood time, and it can be over a couple of weeks to see the water of the Nile carrying in all kinds of things from Africa, or south of Egypt anyway, into the Mediterranean. And it was a fascinating thing to see that nature every single year, every single summer. And then we moved to Cairo, and I became a Boy Scout, and the Boy Scouts took us to outside of Cairo, and then I became fascinated by the Muqattam Mountain and the area east of Cairo where we did all of the scouting. And I saw all kinds of rocks that are white and rocks that are pink and rocks that are red and blue and fascinating lines. So I really became fascinated by nature. So this was it. And when I went to actually, at the beginning, when I was at high school, I thought I would be going to the medical school because this is where the kids that had the highest grades went to the medical school so that they can make money afterwards as doctors. But I did not get the marks to allow me to the medical school. I was only allowed into the dentistry, and they didn't want to be a dentist, so I went to the sciences. So then I had not known the term geology because I asked them at the entrance level, and what is it that you? They told me you have to take courses in physics, in chemistry, in mathematics, and including geology. I said, what's geology? They said, oh, these are the people that go to the mountains and rocks. I said, that's what I want. So I did, and I loved it. I did very well. I was among the top of my class, and because of that, I was appointed as a demonstrator, a lab assistant, and in a new university called Asyut University, in middle of Egypt, south of Cairo. And there, I also applied for missions abroad. So at the time, there were all kinds of missions abroad. The Soviet Union and the United States of America were trying to get the best graduates in Egypt to go and get higher degrees, meaning masters and PhD. And I was selected to go to Soviet Union. I refused and selected to go to the US, and I did come to the US to get the master's and PhD, which I did get from the Missouri School of Mines in the middle of the country in Rolla, Missouri. So I became an expert on the lead and zinc deposits of Southeast Missouri. and that was my PhD. so,
Wow.
so I had nothing
Wow.
to do with astronautics or even astronomy or any of that at all. I just
Uh,
was a scientist, and I did very well there. And when I graduated, I went to actually to Germany for a year and a half to visit all the rest of the mines in Europe that I have not seen, the iron and coal mines of Germany and the phosphate mines in France and Spain. And I did visit all these mines, and I went back to Egypt with 4 tons of rocks from mines collected from the US and Europe, everywhere, to
ah,
establish a school of economic geology, which is the science of minerals and rocks that we make money from. And I was not able to do that. I was
wow.
actually told that I was assigned to be teaching chemistry at something called the New Institute in Suez, and
Wow.
there were four departments of geology in Cairo and in Egypt at the time, two in Cairo and one in Alexandria and one in Asyut, and I was ready to go teach geology in any one of these, and the government would not let me. They told me, this is it. You're assigned by your name is to go to this school to teach chemistry. I said, I don't know that. I didn't get a degree in chemistry. And the man from the Ministry of Higher Education actually said, so you tell me that you cannot open a chemistry book and teach the kids chapter by chapter? I told him, no, I can't, and will not. So I actually had to leave Egypt because of that.
Well, thank goodness that you didn't like either dentistry or chemistry.
Yes.
Otherwise, we'd have lost the shining star for Apollo. I'm very grateful. So, Rick, I got to ask, having gone from Egypt to Missouri, I mean, that must be a bit of a cultural shift.
It
What
was,
was that
it
like?
was. But I loved it. I loved it because
Yeah.
it was the first time that I saw rain in huge amounts.
Uh-huh.
So this was the wild sky was something for me to see, and I enjoyed coming out and actually in the storms and watching and the thunder and all of it because I had never seen it. So it was something for me to in nature to wonder and ponder.
It sounds like you were always an explorer. Um, and again, this must have been around like Sputnik and the beginnings of the space race. Just
Yes.
curious how that affected you and what it was like living through that from your perspective.
We really, but and I lived through all kinds of ideas because, for instance, in the 50 in November 1957, before I came to arrived in the U.S. state, the Russians had sent the very first space mission. It was Sputnik 1, something that rotated around the Earth and just did toot around the Earth, and that terrified the whole world, including the U.S. Everybody in the U.S. was terrified. Here, the Russians have something to do, and are they going to shoot us with shoot things at us? And when I arrived in 1959 in December, President Kennedy had been elected. And President Kennedy in January 1, the day I arrived in Rolla, Missouri, actually announced that within this decade, we'll send a man to the moon and bring him safely back to Earth within this decade. And that was great because before Kennedy, there were three agencies working for the space program. All of them were in the military, one in the Army, one in the Navy, one in the Air Force. And it was President Eisenhower that said, what in the hell is happening here? The Russians have sent something in space, and why don't we have something in it? They told him, Mr. President, we have all three of them working and working. And he said, where? They told him. He said, you put it in the military organizations. That's why the Russians actually did it before us. Get the money of all these three and establish a civilian organization And I'm telling you, civilian, why? Because we don't want it to work on secret things. We wanted to open up its words, the doors, and benefit from all the universities and all the research centers in the whole country. And they established NASA. And that was a wonderful move. And then came Kennedy, was the second most important thing, by telling them within this decade, meaning before 1970, you've got to do that. Send a man to the moon and bring him safely to the Earth. And Apollo 11 was in July 1969, just before. So the assigning a date was damned important.
So let's get to the third most important thing to happen, which was Farouk El-Baz coming to NASA, right? So again, you described you were always exploring, whether it was Missouri or the Nile as a child. Um, Talk to me about then how you became connected with NASA and space exploration and ended up
Pure
at
luck.
the historic moment you were at.
Pure luck. When I wasn't able to start my Center for Economic Geology in Egypt, I came to the US. And by the time I came back to the US, because I was already married to an American girl, and we had already had one daughter was born in the US, but the second daughter was actually born in Egypt. And so here I am with two kids and my wife and absolutely no job, and I was penniless because we came just with the clothes on our backs, which was perfectly okay because I knew that I can find a job because I knew all kinds of people at MIT where I went, and there's Missouri School of Mines and the University of Missouri. All my professors know me, and so I started calling everybody, and all of them said, "But this is October. We already started the semester. We have already hired everybody. Call us in the summer for next year, or call us even the spring. We can consider you for next year." Okay, but what do I do between now and next year? So, so I started applying to mining companies, oil companies, everything that I could. In one of the magazines that I used to get, it's called Physics Today, I saw one column advertisement for geologists to work on the moon. And I started, okay, maybe why not? I'm a geologist. I can work on any place. And I wrote the letter to apply, and my wife was the one to type the letters. And it was 11 o'clock, and she had typed like 3 letters already to mining companies and this and that. And I said, here is one more letter. Okay. And she looked at, and I said, I'm too tired. What's this for? I said, it's for people to work on the geology of the moon. And she said, what? And what do you know about the moon? I said, nothing, but I can learn, but just type it. And she did. And that was the very first one that I got a response from to tell me, come to Washington, D.C. for an interview at NASA headquarters. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was a company working on the communications of Apollo and so on. It was actually established by Bell Labs based on a letter from the most intelligent man that ran NASA for the very beginning, James Webb. That was the best manager I have ever seen in my life. And I met many heads of states, but he was the best head of anything ever, James Webb. And his name is on one of the telescopes that's on the way now, out in the way. Yeah. James Webb, the best administrator of NASA. And Jim Webb had written to AT&T, the company, the phone company, because the only company for phones was only AT&T, American Telephone Telegraph Company. There is no other body that's doing phones except that company. And he wrote them a letter to the board telling them that we are going to go to the moon, and we don't know how to communicate with astronauts, and we need to communicate with them in Earth orbit, and we need to and in the future we actually would like to see them on the moon. Why don't you come and establish an entity to be working at NASA headquarters in Washington to work on all the problems that relate to communications and imaging and television and whatever it is for us. But everything that we do here is going to be based on like government work. So we will pay you for your expenses plus $1 a day. Why $1 a year? The people took it to the board and they said this and that, and they said, sure, we'll do it. We'll take the best people from Bell Labs to work on this thing because it's a national something. It's a national endeavor. So I got them to work the whole problem of all communications, everything else, including a bunch of people to look at the moon, including me, based on they would give them the NASA would give them the salaries plus $1 a year, and that was called Belcom, and that was they did all kinds of things at NASA headquarters, and we were considered as NASA headquarters employees. I had the NASA headquarters badge. When I went to the centers, I could order people there because I represented NASA headquarters.
I'm just glad you weren't using Microsoft Teams. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have any imagery or communication with the moon. So great. Amazing. Thank goodness again for the semester system that got you in. So I'm glad we weren't off by a month. So, Farouk, again, such an amazing time to be at NASA and Apollo. You led the site selection
Yeah.
activity for the, first human landing. Again, such a complex and massive effort. Where did you even begin to try and tackle that issue? And could you talk to
Okay.
us a little bit about what that process was like?
The U.S. Geological Survey had made a deal with NASA headquarters because NASA knew that they would need geologists to figure out where do you land, where do you go, what to do, and how to take big samples and all of that. So they thought I would go to a government agency. There is a government agency called the U.S. Geological Survey. So they went to the U.S. Geological Survey, and the U.S. Geological Survey established a division called the Division of Astrogeology. Astrogeology, and they had a center in Flagstaff in Arizona. Put all of the geologists that are going to work on the moon because somewhere they needed to look at the moon with a telescope and this and that, and they had in Arizona there is a meteor crater, a crater like the craters of the moon, and so on. So that was 65 geologists paid by NASA through by the Geological Survey through money from NASA to work solely on the moon, to make maps, to tell them where to land, and to do the astrogeology division was for the U.S. government was the division that actually had the say in geology. So being at NASA headquarters and a geologist, and I heard that these people are going to do, and I went as soon as I heard that they're going to have a meeting. I thought I will be there with this meeting with the geologists. So I thought I will learn from these geologists what is the story. So I went, and I came out after 3 days learning nothing because it was just one geologist, one after the other, stand up and talk about 1 hour for the features of such and such, the craters of this and that, and the hill and here and there, and absolutely no connection to what is it that they should be doing. So I went to the library and said the NASA library, the headquarters, say, where are all the pictures that we've ever taken of the moon? And they told me, the lunar over the pictures, and they said, where are they? I said, they're in room such as that. I went to the room that was messed up and piles and this and that. I went back to the to the guy that runs the library. I said, listen, I'm going to organize this, and I need this and that. And what he said, what do you need? I said, I need 9 tables, 9 clean tables to put on the sides of the huge room. And he said, when do you want? I said, tomorrow. He said, okay, they will be there at 9 o'clock. I said, headquarters business at 9 o'clock. I went at 9 o'clock, and all 9 tables were there. I took the 2,200 images of the moon, which that were all of them were 20 by 24 inches, huge prints like this. And they cleaned them up from the dust, and they organized them by number and by the lunar orbiter, and then the number within, and sat down in piles. And they sat with each and every one, was summarizing them on a 3 by 5 card, and summarize it and know the number and where it is and the moon, and summarize what's in it. All 2,200. It took me 4.5 months. I get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I leave at 6 every single day for 4 months. When I finished, I thought to myself, okay, now as people that are going to explore the moon, if we want to learn about all the different kinds of surface features on the moon, where do we go? And I found that there are 16 sites. If we land right on top of them or near them, we would have visited, meaning sampled, all the different types of surface features on the moon. I said, okay, these goddamn geologists in Arizona should learn this. And I called them and they said, I want to, because they have their meetings are run by one of their elders, and they have each one of them would stand for 1 hour to talk about something or other. And each of them actually talked about one tiny little crater somewhere. Details of one little crater. What does this do? So I called the man that's organizing. I said, I want to make a presentation next time. And he said, who are you? I said, my name is Farouk El-Baz. Where are you from? I said, where do you work? I said, what do you want to talk about? I said, 16 lunar sites sites that if we go to them, we'll have seen all the different types of lunar surface. He said, who told you that? I said, I found them. He said, how did you do it? I said, I was looking through lunar orbiter pictures. And how does it, what do you mean by site? Give me an example. I said, it's linear, and he said, give me another example. I said that. He said, I said another example. So I told him. He said, okay, I'll put you on. So I did. I went out and I made my 1 hour presentation telling them about the 16 sites. If we go to them, we would have sampled every single kind of feature on the surface of the moon, which means that we would have sampled every single kind of rock on the surface of the moon. The oldest man in the room stood up and he said, I have to tell you that this young man had actually asked me whether we had a philosophy of landing site selection the last time he was here. And I told him, well, we know where these features are and where they are. And I want to thank him publicly because he just showed me that we neither knew what they were or where they were and sat down. And he was the eldest in the group. So from there on, as I went back home and for days on end, I get phone calls from geologists working in one of when you said this is based on such and such. What does that based on? I pull up my picture. I say, if you look at Lunar Orbiter 82 in the lower right, you see that. Thank you. The next one will call me. What was that? Why did you say that? I said that, and give him the thank you. And from there on, I became the source of information to my fellow geologists. So in September of that year, so I joined in March. So end of September, NASA headquarters said we actually should have a group of people to think about landing sites, and all of these geologists will get them together and they can sit and we can make a lunar landing site selection committee so that they sit and think about where to go. Because it's 2 years before Apollo, but they should be thinking now. So I went with these people, or they were mostly geologists, but there were some chemists and physicists and so on, scientists. And we had 3 days. And after the 3 days, the group of geologists had elected me to be the secretary of the committee. So I became the secretary of the Lunar Landing Site Selection Committee by my fellow geologists who realized that I am the one that served that can be of service to them all in their own work. So it's actually by just working hard at it, thinking and working hard on it.
Gotcha. It's again amazing. I mean, so you were not only blazing a trail at NASA with site selection, but we in this era are very used to scientist astronauts. Your fellow MIT alums. They're all, if not scientists, very familiar with it, or engineers. You were dealing with test pilots, former
Yes,
fighter pilots
yes.
constantly. And I'm just curious what it was like trying to teach and transform these military aviators to become lunar geologists and
Yeah.
scientists on the moon. That must have been extraordinary as well.
It was very tough because when I arrived, and there were some people in Houston and some geologists working in Houston also with the astronauts. And I told them, how about talking to the astronauts to get that? I said, Farouk, are you dreaming? The astronauts will not talk to any scientist. I said, what do you? I said, no, they will not. And one of them told me, I just talked to the guys on Apollo 11, and they just told me, I don't want to touch a geologist with a 10-foot pole. So stay away. So I thought to myself, what in the hell is that? And so one of them told me, Farouk, the only one that might listen to you or even shake your hands is a guy by Mattingly. Because he's kind of interested in what is it that they can do in the future when they are assigned an Apollo mission. So I will ask him if you can, if he will just talk to you. Okay, I said fine, and he did. And I went to talk to this Ken Mattingly, and I told him I would like to come and talk to you about how do you actually perform the markings on the landmarks better. So I didn't talk geology, I didn't talk about it, I didn't talk about it. He said, okay, listen, that's got to be at the Cape. I run between 5 and 6, and the dinner is at 7. So you have an hour between 6 and 7 in the Cape and such a place. I said, sure. So I prepared myself, and I took sheets of the lunar surface covering the near side, which we have lots of pictures of, and I made them, and they put some tapes of the roll of the trace of the Apollo orbit. So Apollo will override. And I said that you will be the command module pilot, and you will be looking for landmarks so they can fix the orbital position, because we didn't really know the exact orbit of and that's why the Apollo 11 landed a little farther away from where it was, because we never knew exactly where they were, not to the minute, but they off by a few kilometers. So I told them I'm going to show you lunar surface features that you might be able to use to better get the orbital track. So this is lingo of the pilots. He is going to be asked to mark certain places so he can fix the orbit of the mission, where he is. And that is something that it has to be, a first-rate pilot to do that. So I told them, I will show you what is it that you can do to actually do this better. He said, let's see. So I had actually put these pictures on the wall, and then I marked the 3 first orbits on the moon, lines where a spacecraft would be. And I told them, okay, here are the 7 marks. They give them 7 marks, and if they arrive at 5, they'll be perfect. If they get 3, that will be okay. Less than 3, they wouldn't know where the orbit is for the rest of the mission. So the astronauts naturally want to have at least 3, preferably 5, to mark them. So they look through the telescope like that in the spacecraft and look at the surface of the moon like this as they move like that with the telescope. And when they see that supposed point under the crosshair of the sextant or the telescope, he would say mark, and the NASA would know exactly where the spacecraft is, and therefore, and if they do it in 3 places, then they can fix the orbit of the spacecraft. So we would all know where they are exactly, because we never knew. So I told them, okay, here is the first market, and what do you see in here? He said, oh, this is such and such, and the mark. Oh, this is before you get there. There is a two craters. He said, oh, there is a doublet. I write doublet, and that becomes the name. As far as I'm concerned, that becomes the name of that feature. Never mind what the name is. I write that becomes doublet, and that's it, because that's his nomenclature. And he comes to another one and he says snowman. I write snowman, and that becomes the name of the feature. Never mind what the hell is the name. He's going to remember this. And they remember, and he's one by one. At the end of the hour, I told him, now close your eyes and give me at least 3 landmarks. where do you go for landmark? He said, well, on the east side, we do this, close his eyes, and he started running through them, and he found actually that he can actually get remembered the exact location of 5 of the landmarks. After that hour, he said, hey, you want to stay in for dinner? I said, sure. So I stayed with them because they ate at 7. We had finished at 7. And he stayed and they introduced me to the rest of them. And he talked to them about the landmarks, and they were all very impressed. And before we finished dinner, he said, hey, Farouk, when can you come back? That's it. So I got them because I actually got to him to prove to him that I can actually help him become a better pilot, because he will be a better astronaut, better than the other guy. The other guy will get only 2 of the landmarks. He can get 5 of them, and they can compete with each other with the knowledge of that. From there on, I became the source of information in their training. And that was very good.
Farouk, what you're telling me is you tricked the pilots into
I took the
caring about
pilot
geology.
by telling him that he can actually be very good
Be
if
better.
he knows what in the hell is he flying over. Never mind the fact that it's all craters and pits are craters upon craters. No, it's not craters. There are all kinds of shapes, and these shapes help him figure out where is he exactly.
Manual GPS. That was you were doing it all by hand. Again, amazing. So,
Why did you
Farouk, as you
mention
know,
GPS?
go ahead. Sorry.
Why did you mention GPS?
I was saying before there was GPS, you all were doing it just by where the snowman was and marking it with the sextant. So,
I thought you
uh,
knew I did the first test of GPS.
oh, please tell us about that and the development of GPS. That's
1978. After the Apollo Soyuz mission, I started researching on the desert, and everybody knew because I wrote all kinds of articles in National Geographic and the Smithsonian Magazine, and you name it. And everybody knew I was working on the desert. And the guys from Goddard Space Flight Center, which is very close to Washington, they knew me, and some of them are technicians that they worked on some of the Apollo missions. They called me up and they said, Farouk, we know that you're going to some hell places in the Western Desert in Egypt. We'd like to give you a machine that we can figure out the locations of where you are, so it can help us make a global positioning system that we're trying on now. We're trying to fix it. We're going to get somebody to do some locations in the North Polar region, but we need somebody close to the equator, and the Western Egypt would be perfect. We're going to give you a list of times where you stop moving, so that the machine that you will give you will be looking straight up, and the satellite that will go over will send messages, and that machine will record the messages. And after you get back, we'll find out where these things were recorded, and we'll tell you where you have been, the exact locations. So that was it, and that was proof of the fact that the idea of GPS works, and that was the beginning of the GPS that we're using today.
That's the lesson for everyone. Farouk not only helped the Apollo astronauts find out where they should be, but thanks to your work on GPS, now all of us know where we're going.
That's
so
right.
We owe you for that.
Where the next pizza place is to you.
At that, I mean, you know where I'm headed for the pizza. Now speaking my language. So appreciate that, Farouk. So, Farouk, here at Redwire and at NASA, as you know, we're all excited to go back to the moon under Project Artemis and lunar ice and such another wonderful variety of features on the moon that we weren't even contemplating back in the Apollo era. Do you have any advice or thoughts for us or our colleagues in industry and government as to the Artemis mission and what we should be doing when we go back to the moon, or anything you think we need to pay attention to for this next era of lunar exploration?
Great deal more to know, because we have learned, looking at the chemistry of the moon and so on, that there are places whereby there are higher concentrations of some of the great elements, like titanium. If a rock has anywhere between 4 and 7% here on titanium on Earth, it is a great rock, and we mine it so that we can get the titanium out of it. On the moon, most of the basalt have 11%. Well, meaning, can we actually someday think about going to the moon to get some of that basalt or go there to produce the titanium out of that rock? Because titanium is a very valuable element. And we make all the surgery elements from it and so on, all kinds of things. So there may be other things that we can consider coming from the moon, in addition to the fact where is the water on the moon and how far in the ground that we have to dig to get that water. So because of the history of the moon depends on whether its water had survived or not, and where might be in this, especially in the polar regions, in the permanently sheltered areas, because in the permanently sheltered areas that never see the sun, the temperature has been the minus 250 or something, and therefore, if there is ice, it will stay ice forever because it never sees the sun, and therefore it will never warm up. So there are all kinds of interesting places, interesting ideas, interesting thoughts. But in the meantime, it is things like this will actually just develop more of our technologies and more of things that we need. Because during the Apollo program, they had all kinds of things developed of the that had become available to us all. I mentioned that the communications, of course, but there are all kinds of other things concerning the medical stuff, concerning the chemistry of material, chemistry, looking at the composition of the lunar rocks, and you name it. So with the Artemis, we certainly have, in addition to the fact that we salute women going to following the moon, because there should have been women astronauts in the old days, but to salute the fact that women would go to the moon, and we learn some more, and maybe there are things that we will learn, like we learned from the Apollo missions. We learned from the Apollo missions, we learned all kinds of things that we learned, and we applied all kinds of technologies that were developed for Apollo that we don't know, and therefore I expect from Artemis we will learn things and we will develop things based on the Artemis missions that would help us all on Earth. Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more. I suspect that we're in for some shocking revelations on the moon. It wasn't too long ago we
Yeah.
didn't think there was any water and that it was bone dry. Now, obviously, we know about water ice and a lot of other just differences that we wouldn't have imagined. Yeah, I'm just curious for, while we have you and you talk about the different metals and different compositions, lunar mining, both for use on the moon and even for bringing it back to Earth. Do you think that's something that we'll see in the future? Do you have any thoughts on that or insights or resource utilization as to how
Of course,
realistic or not that may be?
of course it's possible. Who knew that we could actually get things from the bottom of the ocean? Nobody would have ever thought about that in the old days. So we can think about the potential of doing these kinds of things. And one other thing is that we had never been able to land in the lunar highlands, away from all the messes of the impact and so on. So we don't really have a sample of the lunar highlands yet. So we would want to get to the lunar highlands before before it was shocked by the impact of these craters and so on. So we don't know. There may be some interesting chemistry that we have no idea where it might be on the moon. So we expect a great deal of knowledge to come back with the Artemis missions.
We can't wait. And of course, Farouk, again, it is our American Heritage Month, and again, why we're so glad to have you. Just curious from your culture, from your heritage, can you speak at all as to how that might have impacted your work in Apollo or remote sensing or your career generally? Anything you took with you from culture or heritage that was helpful?
Of course, when I came here to the US and started the work on the moon, I was from Egypt, and Egypt was in the fold of the Soviet Union. The Kosygin was in the same month that I came here. Kosygin was in Egypt with Gamal Abdel Nasser visiting the dam, and because the Soviet Union had helped Egypt build the dam, and there were all kinds of things, and meaning Egypt was in the fold of Russia. And therefore there was questions about my beginning here and so on. And there are people in NASA headquarters that actually thought I might be an implant from the Soviet Egypt to mess up the Apollo program. So there are all kinds of things like this, and all you have to do is to actually prove it by your own work that you are an individual working, getting a salary and working on a fantastic program, and as a scientist and wanted to improve the science for all mankind, and you're going to work hard at it, and you're going to be a fantastic worker in this field, and you prove it, and they salute you, and nobody can question what is it that you didn't know. In addition to the fact that in my presence, there were actually people that the astronauts were people that have traveled abroad and had known some people from other countries and so on. So I was dealing with people that are a little more apprised of the whole world. And when they recognize that I'm serious about working for the benefit of the Apollo program, they all accumulated around me, and they joked about all kinds of things. I've convinced Apollo 15 to take the first page of the Quran written in Arabic and in English to the moon. I conveyed to one of the astronauts how to say a greeting of the Earth in Arabic from the moon. Arabic is the only language that was spoken from the moon. In Apollo 15, Al Worden, while roaming around the moon, he said, if the king is there, they called me king because my name is Farouk and I came from Egypt, and therefore King Farouk. So they called me king as my nickname. And he said, if the king is there, marhaban ahl al-ardi min endeavor ilaykum salam. Hello, people of the earth, from Endeavor, greetings. So that was so Arabic is spoken from the moon. And they took a page of the Quran, that's such and such, because I also talked to them about the Arab scientists of the old days, Al-Biruni, Al-Battani, Al-Khwarizmi, all of the people that had all of these kinds of things that helped mathematics and helped the knowledge in the old days. And so there were lots of Arab scientists that did a fantastic job to help the rise of civilization in Europe, based on what the Arabs did, translating the science from the Greeks and then building more knowledge on it. So the Arab world had a place to say, I am here too, and my contributions helped you guys figure all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think algebra, Arab invention,
Sure.
and all the incredible
Algebra,
mathematical.
algebra is based on the name of a guy called Al-Jabr.
There
Uh,
you go.
the algorithm is the name of a great Muslim scientist called Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. Al-Khwarizmi, that he's the one that invented that algorithm is the medical the mathematical combinations of things that would make an algorithm is his own name, Al-Khwarizmi. So we can say that Arabs have a hint on the fact that the Arabs are lousy now and not anywhere to be seen, and way back in the list of bottom of the nations. But the Arabs were wonderful before. They translated all of the Greek philosophy and science, and then they communicated all of that to Europe, and they helped the Renaissance in Europe a great deal. And so we have a place in all of that.
Absolutely. And that's real fame when you get your name into the word algorithm. That'll live a long time. And I'm sure the word inshallah was probably used more than once relative to the space program as well. Like we we were
No,
using it
we
quite
have no
frequently.
inshallah in the program. You either do it and you do it fast and you do it well, or you don't do it.
Well, and I'll tell you where that was done. Again, so impressive the work of United Arab Emirates with the
Yeah,
Hope mission. At
yeah.
Redwire, we were very proud to contribute to some of those aspects. And yeah, I think we are seeing UAE, Saudi Arabia starting to get into it. A real revival of space exploration in the Arab world. So it's exciting to watch that occur. Um, Remote sensing again has, like you say, now, thanks to remote sensing and GPS, I can get my pizza, every day, and you help create that. Out of curiosity, where do you see the field going next? What do you think the next development is. Where would you like to see remote sensing in the future?
Okay, there was first the term of remote sensing, because the NASA guys thought that we're going to have a satellite that will take images of the Earth and then just beam them, and we will recompose the data that was sent and make a picture out of it. And so we'll send something on the Earth remotely from a satellite. And they actually made a meeting to talk about the fact that we need to establish satellites to do that. And the guys from NASA headquarters loved the term remote sensing satellites, and so that the government would agree to putting some money in it, because the government would not know what remote sensing is, so you can impress them by it. So we made a meeting, and it included people from the U.S. Geological Survey and myself, and from the Navy, because also the Army and the Navy and so on had interest in figuring out whether we can see the color of water in the ocean or not. And we made this meeting, and the head of the group from the U.S. Geological Survey said, well, we have aerial photography. Why don't we just call it space photography? Because we have aerial photography, that we made all kinds of maps. Let's call it. But the guys from NASA said that remote sensing is the term itself is such and such, and it will do something. Because the Navy people said we have actually something called the disk, the disk. City desk, we can actually set it in the ocean, and that will actually sense the color, and based on that we assign the color and the salinity of the water. So if you guys can get the salinity and the water temperature, my God, instead of the city desk measurement, that would be great for us. And that will be, rather than ocean sensing, it will be remote sensing. And the NASA people loved it and say, well, that's it, remote sensing. So we had to live with the term remote sensing, even though it's just really space photography.
Amazing. Farouk, you've got a list of awards and honors that, again, we could spend the next day going through. But I'm a horrendous Star Trek fan, so I have to ask, because to me, this is one of the greatest honors anyone could achieve. You had a shuttlecraft named after you in Star Trek: The Next Generation, the El-Baz. And I'm just curious how that happened, or if they talked to you about that, and if you're a fan of Star Trek or science fiction in general.
That's a very interesting story. It actually tells the whole thing, because during the training for the Apollo program, there was a company coming to take a picture of the training of the astronauts. So I was there training, and they had 3 people training for the Apollo 17 or something. And there was they came at the time, and the NASA headquarters told them fine, and they were taking pictures of us while we're doing this training business. And there was a cameraman, the boss, and then a lightsman, and the sound man. And there were 3 of us, and they were doing whatever they could do and so on. But every time we stop, or every time we have a minute, the sound man would come to me and he says, I have seen the pictures of the moon, and there are some elongate craters. How would this form? I tell him that the impact did not come very like this, but on the side, and therefore to make it, think. And then we stop again, how about the features of the such and such? And he would ask me questions, and constantly asking questions, and I constantly apply him, and constantly his boss tell him, stop that, man, stop that, we have work to do. So I thought the kid was very good, and he knew want to do something. I ran to my office. I got one of the books that I had actually published, the lunar photographs. I signed it to him, and they gave it to him. He was delighted. And I never saw him and never heard from him again. That man became the executive producer of Star Trek. And when they were trying to make a machine to go from place to place, and they said, what we do? He said, I will name it for a scientist. I said that I know, El-Baz. And he named it. I had no idea. I had not. One of my NASA friends from NASA headquarters calls me up, and he said, Farouk. I said, what? He said, now get all the books that you have and all the papers you're working on. I was at the Smithsonian Institution then. He said, throw them out the window. I said, what do you mean? I said, I'm telling you, man, get all the papers you're working on and throw it out the window. I said, what the hell are you talking about? He said, man, you've made it. Your name is on something. So I tried to figure out what is this, and I called the guy. And he said me, don't thank me, I should thank you. You made me a hero to my kids and their friends. Every time my kids would have friends, they would tell me, Dad, show us this picture with the stereo pair of pictures of the moon, the one that you get it from your friend, that's the scientist. That was it.
Well, I love Star Trek, but you enabled that journey for real. So you are the true hero. I know we're out of time. We did just have one last question. Maybe if I can fit it in from the chat. As a geologist, have you had any involvement in asteroid sample return missions such as OSIRIS-REx? The Hayabusa 2 mission recently returned material from an asteroid that looks somewhat comet-like. Any
No,
comments there?
the analysis of rocks of the moon and asteroids and things like that that come from it is done by real experts, of the ones who have spent all their lives looking at samples of the rocks and thin sections on. So I would not qualify to become one of the people to look at the composition of such rocks, because that is done by real experts in that field.
Sure. Well, I hope that we're getting you looped into the Artemis work as that program goes forward. No one knows more. So again, I can't thank you enough, Dr. El-Baz, for taking this time for us. This has been so wonderful for myself and all of us. And we may not have royalty in America, but we have the king, and I'll take that any day. So
Sure.
thank thank you again. This has been absolutely wonderful, and thank you for all of your contributions.
Thank you.